A jury in Sydney, Australia has convicted a 34-year-old officer of manslaughter in the taser-related death of a 95-year-old nursing home resident. The case is raising questions about police use of force and accountability. The conviction stems from a May 2023 incident involving Claire Noland, a great-grandmother with dementia, at her care home in New South Wales. Noland, who was holding a steak knife, was instructed 21 times by officers to drop it. Video played during the trial showed Officer Christian James Samuel White saying, "Nah, bugger it," before firing his taser. The shock caused Nolan, who weighed about 100 pounds, to fall backwards, fatally striking her head. She died a week later at the hospital. Prosecutors argued White's actions were excessive and unnecessary. The jury rejected the defense that he was following training to treat anyone holding a knife as a threat. Despite public outcry, police officials confirmed no changes have been made to taser training or protocols. White remains on bail and could face up to 25 years in prison at sentencing. Noland is remembered as a beloved great-grandmother, survived by 8 children, 24 grandchildren, and 31 great-grandchildren.
We are following breaking news tonight at 11. A witness recalls the shocking moments a train hit an empty police car in Greensboro. The crash caught on camera. We want to remind you again, no one was in the car at the time of the crash. Witness Cardin Chin told our crews on scene the officer was responding to a 2-vehicle crash on Hilltop Road and parked their car on the tracks. Later, while the officer was outside the car, a train barreled, as you can see right there, into the back of the cruiser. The video is just shocking, and if you look closely, you can see the officer near the car and run from it before impact. The witness was on scene before the train hit the car to assist his uncle, who was in the initial crash. He spoke about the shock of seeing both incidents so close together.
Astonished, amazed, and dumbfounded. I was honestly still a little bit panicked on the inside from the previous incident with my uncle, because I saw him laying on the ground, injured, and then they had to pick him up with the EMT and all of that.
He tells us his uncle and the other driver of the second vehicle were sent to the hospital. Amtrak says 58 people were on board the train and none of them were injured. WFMY News 2 has reached out to the Greensboro Police Department. They tell us they have no additional information to release at this time.
Good morning and welcome to the Bad Apple Report. It's 7:30 a.m. bright and early right here at home on the range. Thank you so much for being here today, folks. I really appreciate it. We're going to start our day out in Danbury, and we're looking at this lazy-eyed goofball cop. Oh, what has he done? Well, it says right there in the headline, Danbury officer has been charged with stalking following an on-duty conduct investigation, state police say. He did that on duty. Okay, Danbury. A city officer was recently arrested on a second-degree stalking charge following a state police investigation into alleged on-duty misconduct. Whoa. He's been arrested, you guys. Michael L. Rodriguez. His mom spelled his name M-Y-C-K-O-L. 90210, Mom. Okay. Age 34, see what I mean? Turned himself in Tuesday on an active arrest warrant stemming from a Western District Major Crime Squad investigation regarding his on-duty conduct. Okay, as a Danbury police officer, according to the state police, blah, blah, blah. Information discovered during an internal investigation prompted us to contact the Danbury state attorney for guidance. Oh, what are we going to do? Who subsequently requested a criminal probe by the Connecticut State Police. A spokesperson said, oh my goodness, they found out some stuff. She did not provide specifics about the information or when it was discovered, but said Rodriguez, a Milford resident and member of the Danbury Police Department for several years, has been on administrative leave since then, with a disciplinary hearing pending in accordance with the collective bargaining agreement. He's going to try to get off of his stalking charge. All right. Either way, he got arrested. He made it onto the Bad Apple Report. He's got a lazy eye and he's a goofball. All right, on with the show.
I first learned about an encrypted messaging app called Signal while I was covering the case of Metro Sergeant Kevin Menon. Signal is an app that can automatically delete messages. I just wanted to ask you if you knew officers in your department were using an app that can automatically delete messages.
No, I didn't.
Metro Sheriff Kevin McMahill says he didn't know his officers were using the encrypted text messaging app called Signal, but grand jury testimony and evidence proves they were. In October, nearly a dozen Metro officers who worked with now suspended Metro Sergeant Kevin Menon testified against him, some telling the grand jury they used the Signal app for group chats with him. That included Lieutenant Travis McMurtry, who was Menon's superior. Menon is accused of fabricating reasons to stop people on the strip and arrest them.
All of a sudden, like, I feel a hard, shoulder bump on my right side.
In my previous coverage, I spoke to Marquise Brown, who police say was one of the people set up for arrest by Menon.
He turns around and puts his hand up and goes, you got a problem? What's your problem? I ask, do you have a problem? And all of a sudden, I just get arrested.
Screen grabs from a Signal group text chain show officers were communicating about arrest tactics. So we wanted to know, did they delete those messages? And if so, we want to explain why this matters. Under Nevada's open records law, it's illegal for any government agency to delete records, and removing, injuring, or concealing public records or documents is a Category C felony. One reason experts say is that those records must be preserved in case they're needed as evidence in court. Have you heard about government agencies and police officers using this app?
Oh yeah, government agencies and police officers love to try to circumvent the public records laws.
Las Vegas-based First Amendment attorney Mark Randazza explained to me why he believes elected officials and officers use an app like Signal.
They use it because their messages to one another are presumptively public records. So when the public or reporters or other government agencies want to see those records, they'd like to be able to speak to each other in complete privacy. The problem with that desire is that they don't get to have that level of privacy.
I went on Signal's website to find out what a disappearing message looks like. It states, quote, each and every disappearing message will have a timer countdown icon that is visible at the bottom of the message bubble. I downloaded the Signal app myself and tried both deactivating and activating the disappearing messages function. You can see the timer countdown icon is only available when the disappearing messages setting is on. I then went back to grand jury evidence of the selected screenshots from the Signal group text chain. You can see all of the text bubbles have the timer countdown icon in the bottom corner.
They can be purged within a minute of sending them, 10 minutes, an hour, a day, whatever it is. That's a very attractive function because once the message is gone, it's gone forever because it's encrypted.
And if it's gone forever, so is the public record. Metro's use of the Signal app came to light during testimony in the Menon grand jury proceeding. A juror asked one of the officers if there were records of the chats. Metro officer Stephen Casaro answered, quote, to my knowledge, the Signal app has an automatic delete. And Metro officer Eric Sanchez testified he took a screenshot on his phone to keep as evidence just in case he ever needed it, which is how we're able to see them and show them to you. Hello, I'm J1 with Channel 13.
Hi, J1.
After multiple requests to talk with Sheriff McMahill about Menon's case were denied or unanswered, I went to the October 31st Metro Fiscal Affairs Committee meeting to ask the sheriff directly about officers using Signal. Do you have anything to say about that?
It's against our policy.
And are you committed to transparency in your department? Randazza questions if the app is a way to avoid transparency and accountability.
Generally, you use Signal because you're concerned about the government spying on your messages. When the people you're worried about spying on your messages are the ones sending the messages back and forth, it just wouldn't make any sense for them to use it unless they were using disappearing messages.
Why is that concerning to the public?
I think for a lot of reasons.
Freddie Martinez is a director at Lucy Parsons Lab, a transparency and police accountability organization based in Chicago.
When you think about that in the context of police officers who can just download their own apps, delete messages on their own, it really kind of shows how limited the public is in even enforcing the public records laws that we do have.
So whether or not they intend these messages to be secret, the very use of one of these apps makes it seem like they're trying to keep the information away from the public.
Melissa Blasius is the senior investigative reporter at our sister station in Phoenix, Arizona, ABC 15.
Government officials' use of a secret messaging app.
She's also reported on elected officials and police officers using the Signal app there.
Well, in the case that involved the police officers involved in a shooting here, the question was, what exactly were the officers talking about during their investigation of a crime leading up to the shooting? And shouldn't that be important information to be later shared with the courts, prosecutors, and the jury?
What happened as a result of your guys' reporting?
So the city eventually put out very specific rules that said that you can't use a Signal or WhatsApp or any kind of encrypted messaging app to communicate city business. So basically told city workers to knock it off.
Blasius tells me since that report, Phoenix government officials are required to retain encrypted app messages. As for Nevada, the state requires law enforcement agencies to adopt a written policy concerning the use of mobile devices and certain mobile apps by law enforcement. So I filed a public records request to get Metro's policy. The department sent me this administrative notice, which was addressed to all personnel the very same day that I went to the Fiscal Affairs Committee meeting and talked to Sheriff McMahill. It states, quote, department personnel are reminded all business-related communication must comply with Nevada law. Metro also sent me a list of approved mobile applications, and Signal was not one of them. How, as a sheriff, are you committed to transparency?
It's pretty clear that I'm holding Mr. Menon accountable in a lot of different ways.
I'm the sergeant, idiot.
I'm continuing to listen to your concerns and dig into this story. I'm also working to learn if any other officers within Metro who were involved in these arrests and were using this app may face disciplinary actions as well. So far, only Sergeant Menon is facing charges. On the Strip, I'm Jae-Won Jung.
And we're banging through the headlines like you know we got to do. And we're just going to give you a little brief on this guy here. ICE supervisory deportation officer has been arrested for identity theft and disseminating confidential government records. What do we need to know about this guy? Well, it's all right here. U.S. Attorney Damian Williams said Henry Yao, a supervisory law enforcement officer within the U.S. Customs and Immigration Enforcement, allegedly engaged in a years-long scheme to disseminate non-public and sensitive information from law enforcement databases to friends and acquaintances. Among other things, Yao allegedly tipped off an individual who was being investigated by the FBI, disclosed sensitive and non-public information from immigration and law enforcement databases, and most egregiously offered to use his authority as an ICE officer to arrest specific people at the request of and as favors to his friends. Oh, imagine that, you guys. As I've said before, public service is a privilege, not a right. And the career prosecutors at this office and our law enforcement partners will never stop investigating those who seek to abuse that privilege. All right. Henry Yao is a bad apple, and he made it on the Bad Apple Report. On with the show.
I'm Josh Rowe. DA Russell Johnson released new data and maps, and 911 calls and video from the crash that claimed 2 lives back in February. Investigators say Deputy R.J. Leonard and Tabitha Smith drowned in the Tennessee River. This new video shows the moments a cruise pulled Leonard's vehicle from the water. Look at the amount of mud you can see right here, the front seat of his cruiser in that shot.
Yeah, and investigators say they found Smith in the back seat, still in handcuffs. DA Johnson also gave a detailed timeline of events from that night. A 911 call came in at 9:30 that said there was a person near the Highway 60 bridge. Then 2 minutes later, Deputy Leonard is on his way to the bridge.
Then at 9:47, Leonard makes contact with Tabitha Smith. She's in custody 8 minutes later. He then begins his trip back to Decatur and the Meigs County Jail. And at 10:03, he makes his last transmission, which you heard moments ago. It sounded like he said water.
News Channel 9's Ray Collado reports on what else we've learned from this extensive report.
According to this 19-page report from the District Attorney's Office, the most likely scenario is that Meigs County Deputy R.J. Leonard took a wrong turn, ending up with his patrol car in this river behind me.
Meigs County 911 location here, emergency.
We're at the Highway 60 bridge. A man just tried to walk out in front of our vehicle on the highway right before you cross the bridge.
The report says Deputy Leonard found Tabitha Smith on that bridge. And not long after, he handcuffed her and put her in the back of his patrol car, only for Deputy Leonard to respond with one last transmission. According to the report, limited resources and outdated equipment, like an older car without a working speedometer or odometer, played a role in the night's events, as well as Deputy Leonard's inexperience with the area.
He's probably not familiar with the area, especially at night.
as was noted with several of us when we were in grand jury talking about just how foggy it was that late evening. You have a person in custody.
The report does also state that Deputy Leonard may have been distracted due to Smith's condition.
He's the driver of the car, of course, but, like I say, not knowing, we'll never know. Maybe cruel speculation to attribute any of it to her distracting him.
A grand jury report that just released encourages the county to put barricades up before this road goes into water, as well as warning lights.
I raised that myself. Well, we tried to do it at this other location, but the people there who vote for the county commissioners representing that area didn't want it done because they wanted easy access to leave it open to carry on with all the recreational activities that are.
Tabitha Smith's family is now suing Meigs County, stating that Deputy Leonard was not properly trained by the county. Tabitha Smith's attorneys say they do not have a comment on the newly released information.
Governor Gavin Newsom faces a $13,000 fine for violating state political ethics laws.
And Newsom's campaign for governor failed to report millions made in charitable donations on his behalf on time. Case Area 3 Capitol correspondent Ashley Zavala explains.
We followed up with Governor Gavin Newsom's campaign today on this, and a spokesman there defended the governor's record of typically filing these reports on time. Now, California's political ethics rules require elected officials to report within 30 days any major charitable donations that are made on their behalf to other organizations. Now, the FPPC said Newsom and his campaign committee failed to make 18 of those reports on time between 2018 and 2024. That included more than a dozen charitable payments made at his request by major foundations and businesses totaling about $14 million. This includes from companies like Microsoft, T-Mobile, and Amazon. Last Thursday, the FPPC commissioners approved a settlement between the FPPC and Newsom that requires him to pay a $13,000 fine. The chair of the commission, who the governor appointed, said he was fine with the settlement.
It was a cover-up. Alabama grandmother was beaten and killed by cops. New FBI documents revealed, offering closure to black family after decades. It was March 23, 1945, when 4 white cops entered Hattie DeBartolobin's property in Alabama, accusing her of making and selling untaxed whiskey. The 46-year-old black mother of 7 children denied the allegation and welcomed the cops to search her property. But the cops ended up killing her by punching her repeatedly and breaking her neck in front of her 15-year-old son, who was arrested for trying to defend his mother. However, an FBI investigation conducted at the request of the NAACP determined she had died of a heart attack and closed the case 4 months later. One of the cops involved in her death, Klled Smith, later became the sheriff of Autauga County. The case remained under wraps for decades until last month when the National Archives and Records Administration released 69 pages of documents from the investigation under the Civil Rights Cold Case Records Collective Act, which was signed by Donald Trump in 2019. The cold case of Hattie DeBartolobin was the first set of records released under the act, providing closure for the victims' grandchildren who were never told by their parents how their grandmother died. Wow, that's very interesting, you guys. I cried for a couple days because I couldn't believe what had happened to my grandmother. Mary DeBartolobin, age 74, said to the AL.com. It was a cover-up. Her brother, Dan DeBartolin, told CNN, "That's what happened. These documents make it clear." The documents, which can be read here, and here, shed light on the horrific case of murder by law enforcement agents and the ensuing government cover-up that unfortunately still exists today. The name Hattie DeBartolobin may be unfamiliar to most people, but her death at the hands of the law enforcement officers in 1945 was sadly typical of the violence and even lethality that many black Americans suffered in the Jim Crow South, Margaret Burnham, co-chair of the Civil Rights Cold Case Review Board, said in a statement. Although her death was investigated by federal agents at the time, the perpetrators were never held to account. However, we hope that the release of these records after all these years provides some answers to her descendants while also illuminating a dark chapter in our nation's history. The murder. Clyde White, who was an Autauga County Sheriff's deputy at the time, told the FBI that he had received complaints that DeBartolobin had been selling illegal whiskey, so he contacted agents from the Federal Alcohol and Tobacco Tax Unit, which precursor to today's alcohol and tobacco, the precursor there, firearms and explosives, blah, blah, blah. Okay. White said he pulled up to DeBartolobin's farm with 3 ATU agents. named John H. Barabarogue, J.C. Mosley, and L.O. Smith. White said they only found a quart of whiskey along with some empty jugs that smelled of whiskey and decided to arrest her for the whiskey and Edward for interfering with the arrest, even though he did not describe exactly how the boy interfered, other than saying, "These white sons of biatches can search this house." Oh. Okay, White told the FBI that they never struck DeBartolomé or her son and nephew, and that DeBartolomé walked to the car without limping or complaining. He also claimed that DeBartolomé died suddenly in the back seat of the car as they were driving to the county jail in Platteville. Okay, but DeBartolomé's 15-year-old son, Edward Lewis Underwood, provided the FBI with a completely different version of events, telling investigators that he had just come home from school when he saw law enforcement officers pulled up to the family farm in the rural area outside of Selma and asked his mother if she had any whiskey to sell. He said that his mother told the officers that she had no whiskey and that they were welcome to search the home even though they did not have a warrant. But then her 16-year-old nephew, James Collier, came home from school and he ordered the officers ordered him to sit on the ground, but he did not appear. He heard them. So one of the officers walked up to him and punched him, prompting Collier to sit next to Underwood. Okay, leave him alone. He's fixing to go home, DeBartolomé told the cops in defense of her nephew, which is what led to her beating and death. Edward described a horrific scene where the same cop who punched her cousin walked up to his mother and punched her, knocking her down and causing her to fall on a pot of boiling water she was using to wash the clothes. She tried to stand up, but then two of the other ATU agents struck her again, causing her to fall against the pot of boiling water. She got up again, and they both hit her again. This time, she fell on her knees with both her hands on the ground. The agents then lifted her up from the ground and placed her on a chair, where she remained without speaking, panting and grunting like a person whose breath was cut off. Edward said she called for his two older brothers who were working in the field to come to the house. No, Edward said that he called for his older two brothers, Johnny and Benny DeBartolomé. And when they approached the house, the two cops pulled out their guns and ordered them to sit on the ground while the two cops dragged their mother to the car, placed her in the back seat along with Edward. As they were driving, Hattie pleaded with the men to stop, allow her to drink some water from a nearby stream, but they ignored her request and continued driving. She then began vomiting, so they stopped the car and allowed her to vomit on the side of the road. When she was done vomiting, Edward pulled her back into the car, and they continued driving, and then she fainted. They stopped the car again and White walked to a creek, filled up a bottle of water, and then allowed her son to wipe her face, allowed her to drink, but she was already dying. "That's my baby," were her final words in reference to Edward, her youngest son, who was trying his best to help his mother. By the time they arrived at the jail in Platteville, she was dead, and they locked Edward in a cell and contacted the local undertakers to take the mother's body to the funeral home. Okay. Dan Albright, a black undertaker from the local funeral home in Platteville, told the FBI he had been contacted by the sheriff to pick up the body from the jail about 6:30 p.m. that evening. Albright said her body was still in the backseat of the police car and that she was foaming at the mouth and the nose just like a boar hog foams. He also said that the sheriff had contacted Dr. James Tankersley, who examined the body while it was still in the police car and determined that she had died of a heart attack despite signs that they had broken her neck. The only thing I noticed that was different from other bodies was that whenever he picked her body, the head would fall back. Albright told investigators, "I said nothing to the doctor about the neck. After his examination, the doctor said she died from heart trouble." That evening, at the request of Edward, another black undertaker named Fred Williams picked up the body from initial funeral home in Platteville to transport to his funeral home in Selma, where he examined the following morning and determined she did not die from a broken neck, but arrived at the conclusion without dissecting her neck. He also pointed out that it had been more than 12 hours since she had been killed, and rigor mortis had set in, which would have made it impossible to come to a full determination, as we could all imagine. According to 2016 medical studies, it's impossible to make a full determination about a broken neck without dissecting the neck, stating the following, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Rigor mortis, which is blah, blah, blah. We know all that kind of stuff. Okay. After reading the documents, Dan and Mary DeBartolomé, whose father was Benny DeBartolomé, one of the youngest men working in the fields when their mother was killed, finally understood that they were never told by their family how their grandmother had died. Even while visiting her grave growing up, all the 7 children have since died. My dad and his brothers and cousins, got to witness what actually happened, Dan told the AL. Seeing that, I'm sure it was so traumatic for my father, and it was one of the reasons that he never said a single word, nor he or his other 6 sisters or brothers ever had a conversation with us about what took place. Okay, that's a tragic, tragic tale, you guys. And it was a long read, but bad cops, bad apples. They got a history, deep roots. After that big story, I think we're going to call it a day. Thank you so much for being here to watch the Bad Apple Report. I really do appreciate it. I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'm going to whip up another batch of bad apples just for you, and we'll see you back here tomorrow morning, 7:30 a.m. bright and early.